Let's continue with modeling. Today we will look at subdividing, how that works. So basically, it's what you learned, hopefully, during the week is working with pretty simple models, right? Very straight, hard-edged models. But then we're going to look at how you can take pretty much anything and turn it into smooth, nice models. So we'll just be doing some kitchen props, which is a nice starting exercise. So that's also your lab assignment. You'll be making, teacups and tea things. Yeah, teapot. So that's basically it. But then we also left something out of the previous lecture, which was basically how you can model anything. So I wanted to model a simple chair, and we didn't have time. So let me just, I'm going to try to cover that as well. And so this lecture will be a little condensed, but I think it'll be okay. So we'll, first of all, we need to be able to get something in here like a reference image. So what's typical when you do CG modeling, maybe you've seen this, like you have like orthographic references. So reference, and these are, very, very accurate. This used to be the case with CG character modeling, is that you would first do this very, very precise orthographic layout, and then you would very carefully model it in Maya or something else. But this has really kind of changed. So especially for CG character workflows today, we typically start with a sculpt, and then you're no longer reliant on this very, very well-defined orthographic image. It's nice to have if you have it. But it's also nice to be able to do work, in my opinion, without necessarily relying on it. So it's nice if you have it, but so what I'm going to be showing you is just how you can take this and work a little more, yeah, just loosen things up a little bit. But typically if you search, let me search for, I'm going to be just building like a simple, very, very simple model of a chair. So if I search orthographic reference chair, maybe I can find some, here. So then I could line these up. So this would be in the side view, this would be in the front view, this would be in the top view. And it's very, yeah, if you have something very accurate and you just want to recreate it. But today, of course, we have the possibilities of doing like photogrammetry and scanning. So we can, if you wanted that precise chair, you could just make it. You don't have to build it. You can just take a lot of photos and create a mesh for it. But that's what I'm saying. I think it's more useful to be able to build something a little more conceptual. So maybe I'm just going to search for a chair. And we're just going to take like something like this image or this image. Just like a simple little challenge. Let me see. Well, maybe that one is, well, that's more subdividing. I just want something pretty simple. So if we have something like this, just being able to build it roughly. So let me just save this. Whoops. So I'm working locally. CGArt1, Lecture2. All right. So this will be my chair reference. So then, okay, so there's a couple of ways of doing this in Maya, how to set up references. We have something called image planes. So I'm not going to be using image planes, but then that just mentioning it, if you want to look into it, you can set up image planes. What I'm going to simply do is I'm going to make a plane. So a polygonal primitives plane. I'm going to attach that image in here. It's just, that's going to be a way for me just to get that chair in here as an image. And I don't need these divisions again. So let me make my button again, since everything seems to be disappearing. I don't need divisions. Create, and then I'll make a button of this. And now I'll have a button of creating a plane with no divisions. All right, so how do we get something on here? We need an image. We have not talked about this at all. but we have something called the hypershade. The hypershade. We open the hypershade. And here we see we have some strange things. We have a material, we have a particle cloud, shader glow. Don't worry about these. This is a Lambert. A Lambert, it just means that this is some sort of a Lambertian type of surface, which is it reflects light very evenly. So it's almost like chalk or, rubber, something that it's not very specular. We're not gonna really talk about this now, but we have obviously other types of materials in here. So we'll get back to this. So it's like Maya. So you see Blinn. It's just named after a guy called Jim Blinn. So you see that has different characteristics. So let me copy this sphere just to show you. So that's the Blinn shader, and I can middle mouse button click and just drag and drop this other material on there. So now we have the Lambert next to the Blinn. So you see the Blinn just has more of a specular highlight. So this is more of a Lambertian surface. This is more specular. Okay. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves, so we're not really going to be doing this. But all I need you to do is go in here and find the hypershade. And then I'm just going to make a simple surface shader. The surface shader is actually the easiest, the most simple type of shader because it doesn't really calculate anything. It just projects an image on there. So you see it just has an out color. And that's where we're going to be able to connect an image. So, okay, so I saved the image. Let me now, just before we do anything else, again, save a project. So I definitely need my own path. So that's the path in which the Maya project will be created. So this will be 1709-06 Lecture2 project. Accept. And then this will be the scene. So now I can save the scene. 1709-06-01 or chair. Okay. Oh, I saved it as a binary. That's okay. All right. So how do we get it in here? If you want to attach any image to a material in Maya, Maya wants you to place it in the source images directory of your project. So if I go and I look, not there. Here, this is the Maya project directory. There's something called source images. This is where technically all your files that go directly into a material should be located. So currently I just saved the reference file. Let's open it with Photoshop and have a look at it. Choose another app. I want an app. Okay. Can I drag that in there? Really? I can drop it in there? Okay. So let's look at this image. Image size. Okay, so it's a 1-to-1 image ratio. So the width and the height, they're equal. That's not always the case. Let's actually, well, yeah, let's try to find something that's not. Maybe these are all. Yeah, these are all. Except this one. Okay, so let's do this one then. No, no, no. Can't I just see it? Oh, there we go. View image. And then, so I can drag it in there. Oh no, that's the smart object. Go away. So that's our new reference. Just because I wanted to show you that sometimes it's not always the case that these are one-to-one. And then you need to make them one-to-one. Okay. So what I don't want to do is just enter here. Oh, I'm going to make it equal. So I'm going to do this and enter 7, 10, and now they're equal. Well, that obviously distorts the well. I have incorrect. It distorts the image. Obviously, you can't just scale it. You have to. You know, if I just do this, it's no longer that chair. So how do we do that? I make a new image or a new file. And I can be very accurate. So these are pixels. I can just say 10. Okay, so these are just numbers doubling up from 2. Like the most typical image resolutions, right? So 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and so on. 512, 1024. So 1024 would be what we call 1K, which is a pretty common resolution. This is just 1024 times 1024 pixels. Do you have to use these numbers? No, but you might as well. 2048 by 2048. Okay. I don't. What was the original resolution of this chair? I don't know. Maybe 1024 would suffice. And just create or whatever. And then I can just hit Control A, Control V, or Control C. So Control A will select everything. Control C will just copy, and then Control V just to paste it in there. So definitely 1K is more than enough for this image because it's pretty low resolution, right? So that's how you do that. So because, well, or I could, there's other ways I could have extended the canvas in here and everything, but I like just making a new layer, making a new document. You decide on the resolution and you copy the thing in there. Now I can scale this uniformly if I want. It's obviously, I'm not making it any higher quality. You know, it's going to be kind of low, maybe pixelated. I'm holding Shift to just scale it, but hit Enter. And I could have down res this probably to like 512 because it doesn't need to be any higher. But fine, let's just save this. So save as, and we could do like a PNG or JPEG. It's going to do old school JPEG. This will be my chair ref, but this is my actual chair ref though. Oh, it's not going to allow me to do that. So this will be 1K. 1K being 1024 by 1024 pixels. Okay, so where do I want to place that image? In the source images directory. So this one is my actual reference that I'm going to be using. Let me just copy that into the source images directory. It's because that's going to be directly attached to the material in Maya. Okay, and then I could obviously, well, I'm just going to delete these. I don't need them. Go away. I'll delete this as well. So now it's in there in the source images. So back to Maya. And this is my material we just made. I just click there, surface shader, middle mouse button, click and drag, and I can drop it onto the object. And we're still in the hypershade, so I can just click out color. And you see, if I just do the coloration, I can also select the color. That's how the surface shader works. It just displays the image. It disregards completely any sort of lighting you have in your scene. It shows the image. So it's very simple. So another way to access the material is to right click and hold, just like we did to access the components on the object. We can also right click and hold, and you have something called material attributes. This is on any object. You can just right click and hold. That will open it, should open it, in the attribute editor. I don't know why it's not doing it. There you go. So Control A, remember you can toggle between, and there we have the attributes. And there we have out color. So if I click there, now we have to select file. So that it will just create a file node. And okay, so this is the file node in which the image actually needs to be attached. Okay, so just click here. I can I can turn off this filter type. It doesn't really matter, but I turn it off. It's just like a blur. It's more for animation to prevent flickering and things like that. Here, chair ref, you see automatically it goes to the source images directory. There I have my chair. Open. I can't see it because I have to hit number 6 on the keyboard. So number 6 on the keyboard will show you the textured version. So remember, I can hit number 4, that's wireframe, 5 is shaded, and 6 is textured mode. So where should it be placed? Well, anywhere. But remember, if I take a look down here, the Z-axis should be the front. Let me get some more space here because it's really kind of low res. Okay, you can press Control Spacebar for full screen mode. It's a little okay, and it doesn't allow me to do that. Oh, that's annoying. Okay, anyways, I'll work like this. Huh? I can't work like this. Go away. Okay, so okay, a little better. Okay, so control space, I can do full screen. So let me just, if you hit E, if you hit hold E, hold left mouse button, you can have options for the rotate tool. If you hold W and left mouse button, you can have options for the move tool. I'm going to hold E, hold left mouse button. I'm going to activate discrete rotate. That's just going to snap it to rotational values. And then I can just place it anywhere. So I know that, look, yeah, you can't really see it, but the C-axis is pointing that way. So this should be the front of the chair. The X-axis should always be the width. Let's talk about scale. Now we're going to save the scene. So I think we talked about it very briefly, is that what are these units? They're obviously relative. They could be anything, but they're set to centimeters, and we will leave them at centimeters. This has to do with, so see here, working unit centimeter. You could change it to meter, but don't do that. So because we want them set to centimeter, this has to do with lighting, correct fall off on lights and everything. And that's it. Set it to centimeter. Leave it at centimeter. But that means actually that this chair is currently it's going to be like 4 centimeters wide, which is a pretty uncomfortable chair. So I don't know the size of the chair. Does anyone have a suggestion, like how tall would that chair be? Half a meter? So if I, for instance, make a polygonal cube and go to the options for it, I can enter numbers here. So if I have half a meter, that's what, half a meter, so that's 50 centimeters. And then the width, what do you think? Yeah? 20, the width, 20 centimeters. It needs to be wider. 45 at least. I don't know, whatever. Let's make it 45, and I think we need to make it a little taller. Who knows? I don't have measures for this. Depth. This is whatever. I'm going to make it the same depth, maybe 50. Anyways, you get the idea. So if you had exact measurements, this is the cube within which your chair needs to fit, right? That's it. How do I get that cube on the grid? I can hold D, I can hold V, and I can snap the pivot, and then I can hold X, and then I can, or actually go here and hit the hidden menu and hit 0. Yes. Or use the side views, which is also kind of nice, and hold X. So my grid is tiny. Then I go to Windows or Display Grid Options, and what I do is I just enter a couple of units there. So length and width, I enter a couple of units before the comma, and I do the same for grid lines. And then I hit Apply. Now we have a large grid. Or if you want to customize your own grid, that's where you do that. One other issue, though, with scaling things up, well, you probably won't encounter this. I don't know, depends on your scene. But you have to be aware of the camera's clipping planes. So if I go out here and I go far away, you can see that everything disappears. And this has to do with the clipping planes of the camera. So this, you wouldn't have seen this in the tiny scene, but now we scaled everything up. So we just have to make sure we select the camera Control A for the attribute editor. And the far clip plane, you might need to just add maybe one or a couple of units there as well. The opposite of that is the near clip plane. If you go close, there's a point at which this will clip off. So you see, well, I can go pretty close because this is a pretty huge scene. But see there, it starts clipping. So if I want to be able to go closer, okay, essentially, if you rescale your scene and you see that it flickers or it seems like it's bugging out, try adding a unit here, and then you can also set this to something like 1 for a larger scene, okay? That's what you need to do if it starts flickering. Okay, so that's clipping planes. Oh, go away. So, maybe I can tear the outliner off, maybe that'll be easier, and I'll just minimize that there. So, okay, well, I have a huge grid, maybe I can make it smaller, but where did I put the thing? Okay, so I need to it's a tiny little reference image. And press number 6 to see it. And there it is. So I can go to the front view, press number 6. So this is not going to, I'm just going to use this as like I said, if I had like an orthographic reference image or something. But I'm going to scale this more or less to fit the dimensions that we just sort of figured out. And let's just analyze this chair. So how many objects do you think this chair was made out of? Like how many different objects? Yeah? Yeah, shoot. Question. Yeah, you can just scale it up. So these are all relative units. And it's not even dependent on your texture resolution because that's also actually independent from your polygonal polygons because that's in the UV questions. No, shoot. Hmm? Oh, all right. So you're answering my question. Great. Thank you. All right. It's about 20 objects. So, okay. So you've been counting. Great. Point is, we need to do an analysis, right? Sort of figure out how is this built. So when you're saying 20 objects, I'm guessing you counted this one as one, right? And this one, and maybe there's one in the back. And if you had access to a chair, you could look at it and, maybe there's more stuff under there. Maybe you don't see it, so that's fine. Point is, we don't have to build this in one single mesh. And sometimes I see people starting out with CG and they think this is some sort of great challenge they set for themselves. And yeah, I made a great model, everything is connected. But yep, so what? It doesn't have to be. Because it would actually be constructed of several different objects. And it's actually better if it's constructed that way in CG. Because we want those little gaps. We want the light to be occluding in here, So like I was saying sort of last time also about adding some imperfections to your work. Okay. Let's talk about display layers. We have this thing down here in the channel box at the bottom. If I click the object, there's something called add this, create a new layer and assign selected objects. If I click it and assign this object, now it's in a display layer. Display layer is I can hide it. It doesn't disappear. You can see it's still there in the outliner, but it just disappears from view. So then I can also click here to turn it into a template. So now I can't touch it. It's just there as a template, which is great. It's my measuring cube. I can leave it there if I want. If I get sick and tired of it, I can hide it. Or I can also make it a reference. Now the whole object shows, but I can't touch it. So display layers are kind of neat sometimes. So let's just get started. Let's start with this leg. How would we build it? Probably a very simple process. I'm just going to make a cube and scale it. Or I can grab the verts, hold X if I want to snap those up. And if I hold Control and scale, it's going to scale those in X and Z simultaneously. So I can hold Control and scale like that. So I don't want to be scaling only in that axis or only in that axis, but both at the same time. So that's pretty great for doing that. So now we have more or less the general shape. You know, these would be a lot of trial and error figuring this out. But this is where the orthographic views are pretty great for figuring out the relation. Done. Thank you. Comment? If it's possible to build this thing, you could do the same thing in Blender using what? Mask. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I don't know. What do you do with the mask? What do you do? Oh, so it's like a more like a create polygon tool? Hmm. Well, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, but you have something like create polygon tool. This will allow you to like create polygons if that's what you mean. And then that will create the polygon. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I could go in here and I would do this and you start painting the plane according to the reference. Yeah, you can do that. It's nice. I think so. Well, so we're going to be talking a lot about this because a lot of times it's preferable starting from planes. So, but you can find your own preferences, you know. So if you're comfortable using something like that tool, perfect. Okay, but so the leg of the chair is done. What's sort of missing from it? I mean, it looks great, but there's something missing. Okay, you can answer. Oh yeah, so that could be that it's sort of okay. Yeah, but let's say that it might bend slightly that way, right? Probably. Yeah, it seems to do that. How can we achieve that? Yes, exactly. So we insert some edge loops. So here I'm just going to insert a few edge loops, maybe like 3 edge loops then. So I'm just going to do this and then this and that. And then I grab the verts and let's say, so it might be bending slightly this way. That's what you were saying. So I'm just going to grab them. So start moving them carefully around. So now we have this bend maybe, whatever. And then we talk about the other axis. So I could also use the side view. And then if it had more of an, you said like an S curve probably going forward, or I don't know, like a curve going forward. It probably does, like a little bit. Something like that, right? And now I've achieved that curvature. So this is how you start building simple objects. You add edge loops, you modify the vertices, move things around, make them behave the way you want. So for more complex shapes, this becomes an issue if you're starting out from a cube and just building, and you want to have a very uniform thickness. That's kind of hard to achieve using a cube, but it's easier to do with a plane. So that's what we're going to be talking about later today, though now, but a bit later. So if I had, for instance, like this, and I do this, I'm going to just delete the rest of it. And then I can grab this edge. So if we had a more complex shape, we're getting ahead of ourselves anyways. But if it's going like that and it's more complex, it's easier to build it flat. And then I can extrude the whole thing in object mode to get that uniform thickness. And then I can subdivide it and I can do whatever I want. Okay, so that now we got the curvature. So it's kind of curving that way in a strange way and curving that way to do whatever we want. Okay, what else is missing? What is missing? Why does it look so fake? Sorry? Smooth it. Press 3. I'm sorry? Smooth it out, you say. Yes, so how would you describe, what's the difference between this and this? Sharp edges, I agree. Is that what you were getting at? Okay, sorry. Okay, yes, smooth it out. So you're right. So this is more kind of smooth it out. There are a couple of ways to achieve that. So you can either, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be subdividing everything, right, later on. Then everything becomes smooth, and then we need something called creasing edges, which we're going to be talking about. But there's also another way. You don't necessarily have to subdivide. You can insert something called beveled edges, which is just, let me show that first on just a cube again. So I'm going to create polygonal cube. Oh, that's my new default now? Okay, great. So this is the same problem. The reason, well, part of the reason this looks kind of strange is that usually when you're looking at objects, so if you look at the table next to you or some anywhere that has like a straight edge, there is some volume on the edge. So and what will happen is that the light will catch that edge and actually creates sort of a line of light, like a streak of light on the edge itself. So here you get this very harsh transition from the light side of the mesh to the dark side of the mesh, right? So it looks very CG. And that's why we have the Bevel tool, which is under Bevel here. If I'm in object mode and just click Bevel, it's just gonna, what it does is that wherever there were edges, now there's a set of polys. So you see the edges, now there's polys. Poly here, poly here, poly here. Still edges, of course, but it just inserts like a face. And then I can go down to the inputs. If I go to the channel box and I go to the bottom, there's the bevel operation. And here I can click fraction, and I can hold middle mouse button and click and drag and use it as a slider, which is a little annoying. There is a way to, I guess, if you hold control, I think you have a little bit of a finer control over the slider. So middle mouse button, you can hold control, and or enter it numerically if you wanted to. So you can see it can be very subtle, but now we have a little transition. So we can also go in the bevel operation and do like 2 segments instead of 1 segment. If I have 2 segments, it's also going to insert just an additional edge loop in the middle of the bevel. And now it looks better, right? Excellent. Because we can see the light catching the edge. So that's what we're going to try to do here. But if I just do the bevel operation, let me add it to the shelf. If I just do it in object mode, what do you think is going to happen? Okay. Let's try. So it's not so messed up, but it's just that it introduces also faces here where there were edges. We don't necessarily need them. You could do it if you're lazy and just quickly want that. And then we do 2 segments, and that will be, maybe that'll be okay. But see, we get this sort of strange artifacts because we have these additional edges. We don't want that. So get rid of that. What we can do is just quickly select the edges that we need it for. And in this case, it would be easier to maybe select the edges that we don't need it for, which are only these. These are the internal edges. They're not the contour edges of the object. And then I can shift and just do a marquee selection that will invert the selection. And now we have all the contour edges, which is where the bevel needs to be. And then click bevel. And the bevel is a bit too large, but then I can do the fraction. I hold control, middle mouse button, I have a slider, slide it down, and then I do 2 segments and do object mode. Well, it's a little more convincing. So then you want to add the bevel, though. You probably want to add that later. So you want to make sure that you have all the curvature established, everything is looking pretty good, and then do the bevel. So, any questions? Yes? Yeah, you could select the whole thing and hit bevel, but then it's going to do what you saw it did, like it inserted bevels everywhere. So probably you need to be more manual about it, and you need to go over and carefully select the contour edges. So sometimes it can be a little labor intensive having to go over and select everything. Okay. So, other questions? Okay, so let's just actually see how we can set this up then. So we have the chair ready. Let's just build the seat. Well, we can use this one. That's our seat. Come here. Seems like might have to rethink our scale, our measuring cube. I'm just going to eyeball this. But at least we're in the ballpark. We're not like building a few centimeter chair. So the bevel operation should still work, the fraction. Sometimes this will not. No, I'm gonna build this again. So I'm just gonna select this poly, delete the rest, and then I'll extrude this. So now we have that cube. I can use this orthographic view, the side view in this case, and then I can move this forward. This will be the front leg. So this is very helpful using the orthographic image views. Yeah, so you get the idea. It would be figuring out the shape of this, pushing and pulling the vertices around. And then when you're happy, consider doing the bevel. But I'm also going to add, again, the delete history on the shelf. And also the center pivot. So these were the things I added last time. So this is what you want to do. Just get into the habit of deleting history or freezing transformation values on your objects when they're placed. So let's go to the front view and try to place this over here. So maybe there's a bit too much of a curvature on there. It's easier to change it's easier to work with the curvature without the bevel. And now it's easier to mess up those vertices that are closer together when I start moving them around. But you can see how easy it is to really revert back. So if I copy this and you say, now I want to make it again, sort of, to do the bevel operation again, I just select those vertices, shift select the rest, and I'm left with that basic form, and then I control E to extrude in object mode, and now I'm back. That's my shape, and then I can bevel again. But it's really no use. You don't have to bevel before you're sort of happy with the placement. All right, and then I'm just, this is really as simple as this is building a chair like this, because all these objects, you don't have to make them. You don't have to build it from one mesh. Sometimes, of course, we do have to build things from the same mesh if it needs to be like. Also for wood, like if it's carved out of the same piece of wood, But chances are this chair is not carved out of the same piece of wood. So, how can I get this leg copied over to the other side? Any suggestions? So let me freeze the transformations on everything. Let's save the scene so that I have it. How can we get it across? Hey, there's a mirror tool? You have to mirror it. There's a mirror tool? That would be great. Should be a mirror tool. There's a mirror tool in ZBrush. Let me know if there's a mirror tool. Yep. Yes. So this is Maya. We have to do everything manually. We have to scale it in -1. But it's kind of nice, we know what we're doing. So we copy this mesh. What else? How can I scale it in -1? What do I need to do? What am I scaling in -1? Please elaborate. Which axis? Yes, x-axis, because it's the width. Okay, so I can do that. So I make a copy and I do -1. Oh no. Oh, and then move it. Okay, yeah, so I could do that. Or, just like you said, it's like I'm still going to do that, but I'm going to copy it and then just move the pivot first. So I would D and hold X, and I move the pivot there, and then do the scale -1. So simple as that. And then freeze transformations, delete history, center pivot. You could like duplicate special and then do it in here, and you could probably make a button for it if you wanted to, or something. There should be a mirror tool. It's 2017, but it's okay. I don't know. Yeah. So, but it's pretty forgivable. You make a copy, -1. That's it. You know, there are some other tools in here that oh, mirror. There it is. The green tools are new. So, okay, so this might work. No, so see, this is not it. Okay, because, well, maybe. I don't know. You can try it out. But, so here I'm going to snap this to, because we're going to be using, let's say I'm working on this model, and I'm doing this. Typically, well, I'm not doing that. I'm doing that. I could be working on both sides at once, right? Because it's a symmetrical object, so I have to go there, and I have to do this, and I can scale the vertices toward each other to get that symmetry. Or I can hit W, left mouse button, click and hold, and activate symmetry. And then it will actually do a symmetrical change. But I'm going to hold W, hit left mouse button, and deactivate symmetry. Because what I like to do, you can do this, but trust me, it's going to get annoying if you always have to be working symmetrically. What you need to be able to do is to sometimes just work on one side and then just trust yourself, because you're going to be mirroring this over at one point anyway. So then you keep massaging and you keep looking at this curvature, getting that perfect, and then you mirror it at some point. So maybe they've updated the mirror tools, I don't know. But one tool is called the mirror geometry tool. So maybe this is the new mirror geometry tool. From what I've briefly tried it, and I didn't like it. I wonder if they still have the old school tool. Do you know? I don't know. We don't know. Anyway, so let's try their new amazing tool. Symmetrize. Oh, they have a symmetrize tool. There's a lot of new tools in here. I should have learned this probably before I taught you guys things. Would be nice. I don't know. Let's see. If I do this and then but anyway, so all the new tools, you can see that they're green. So they've probably added some nice new features. Let's try this symmetrize. Doesn't work, of course. I don't know, you have to select half of it. Okay, let's try it. Symmetrize. Yeah, I have to watch a tutorial on that. But anyways, you can experiment. But what I do usually then is just mirror geometry, which is always used to work fine and dandy, but they removed it, it seems. So let's try their new horrible mirror tool. World, mirror axis, minus, no, okay, so we want to do plus x. So you take a look at the axis. So you see, we want to be mirroring with the x-axis, with the direction of the axis. So that's with x, plus x. The other direction would be minus x. So that's we have plus and minus. So we're doing it across x, world position, combined with the original. Okay, let's try it. Okay, so it seemed to do it. Okay, so that worked fine, but in some cases you have some more challenging. For instance, if you have vertices that are really close together, that can be very often the case. And then you're working on one side and then you delete the half, and then you go over here, and now we're ready to mirror. Important also for mirroring correctly is that all these vertices on the dividing line should be aligned, right? So if this is skewed over ever so slightly, these might not be merged. So what you should do, or what you could do, select all the vertices, go to the move tool, go to X and hit 0 for X. So that should move them all. Remember, this is the hidden menu. This should move them all to 0x. Another way to do it, if they were misaligned, select them all, scale, And just be careful you're not scaling in Y because you're going to mess up the positioning of the vertices, but only scale in X. So I'm scaling the vertices towards each other. If you hit plus and minus, you can alter the manipulator handle. But if you scale it towards each other, eventually it's going to stop scaling. That's how you can also you have to get used to, sometimes you scale, sometimes you move, sometimes you rotate to manipulate the vertices. So I can move and hold X, snap to the middle. Let's now try, this is more challenging sometimes for the mirror operation because that did it well. So maybe they made it better. Let's see. We can go into the options for it. Yeah, so we have something called the merge threshold. That you have to be aware of this. This is something like if this is set. Okay, so I am not merge. Yeah, it's no longer like behaving like the old tool. So merge border versus merge. Anyways, so it seems like maybe you don't really have to be so mindful anymore, and that would be nice. So my guess is this will work nicely for you. The only thing I was going to show you is that sometimes at least the old mirror tool, you have to be sort of careful because sometimes the vertices might be, this might happen. That the vertices actually, oh, see, it didn't merge them. It messed everything up. I'm going to reset this, and then plus X, merge border vertices, okay. Okay, now it's merged. Let me show you how to merge and detach components, and then we take a break. If I press number 3, that's to subdivide. You already knew that. It's going to be like a smooth version of the object. And this looks nice. Everything is just together, hanging together, looking nice. Okay, press 1, press 3. That's it. Now we have a pillow. But if one of the vertices were to be detached, and I can do this. So let's say I do this one. Oh, let me show you one other thing. So heads-up display, under display, heads-up display, we have something called polycount. This will show you more details. So you see faces, edges, verts, a lot of information. But you take a look at the vert count, 0, 0, 0. If I select, it will say verts, you have one vert selected, one vertex point selected. If I do this, I have 2 vertices selected. If I do this, I have 3. You see right there. If I have this, these are all the vertices in my model. So this, you can quickly check if this is one vertex. Yes, it is, because I'm doing a selection marquee. It's only one. But then I can also select it, and then I can go Edit Mesh, Detach. This is components. This is to detach components. Now, if I do the selection marquee, it's 4 vertices. Why is it 4 vertices? Because I have 1, 2, 3, 4 incoming edges, and they're all just converging and meeting in this point, right? So, but now they're separated. So if I start moving this around, if I go to the move tool and I can move all these verts around, and I just cut open my model. Oh no. And sometimes it's hard to spot because, and like you just saw with the mirror tool, sometimes this will happen and you didn't know it happened, and it's not nice. Press number 3 and that will happen. And if you press number 3 and that happens, you have to not pretend it didn't happen. You have to try to fix it because it means, oh no, something's not right. Because when you press number 3 on a polygonal mesh like this, it should give you a very predictable, smooth result. This means something's wrong. And in this case, usually it's like a detached component. So you go over and you check and see, okay, well, that's only 1. And this is only, so I'm selecting through the object. You have to be careful with that. So I'm doing this and I'm selecting around. This will select vertices straight through. So now I'm selecting 3. Go to wireframe and you see why, because I'm selecting those. But this is only 1. But this is 4, which we already knew. So then I can go Edit Mesh, Components, Merge. Now it should be fine, and I can do a selection marquee, and as you, yeah, it's only one, and now when I hit number 3, it should be fine. So that's how you detach and merge components. So that's pretty important to know. Let's take a quick break. We'll do like 5 or 10 minutes. So yeah, just be back at 1:30. All right, I'm just gonna make this. This is now the pillow. I will have a pillow. So it's totally fine to just like stick objects together. You'll hear from some people that this is horrible to do, but it's not really. And you can really get away with it. You can really, they can even intersect a little bit. Obviously, you don't want this, that's not okay. But you get it. This can be intersecting on there a little bit. If I just place that pillow on top. I don't want it to be hovering above it, because then light won't really be occluding underneath. Really want to place it on that surface if I needed a pillow. So, yeah, let's just make the back leg quickly. So I'm just going to make use of this guy. But I'm not going to start extruding this having the thickness. Like I said, it's probably going to be easier. Well, for this I could have. It doesn't really matter. But I want to show you the sort of point here, what I'm talking about. Because no, let's keep it simple for this. Okay. Or not. But sometimes it's hard to see in the side view, but I can be working with the curvature of an object. So let me just explain what I'm talking about. Let me copy this over here. This is just a few polys, right? It's a few planes that has no thickness. So if I go to the side view, if I deselect it, it'll just disappear, because remember that a Maya edge has no thickness. There's no thickness there. But I can still select it in the outliner if I wanted to, so it's there. Or if I spacebar click, I can obviously still select it in the perspective view. So if I know what I'm doing, I can still use the side view here, and I go to the vertex mode, and I can keep manipulating this curvature. So this is what I'm like. If I hit number 3, I can make a subdivision preview. So it creates a curvature based on the placement of the vertices, right? So that's very similar to actually creating a curve. So we haven't talked about this, but in Maya you have some other types of primitives. These are called NURBs, non-uniform rational B-spline primitives. They're just curved. They're models made from, they're curved surfaces. It's a totally different type of surface. So it used to be that you'd have to like build NURBs. No one really does this anymore. Like we can build things with NURBs, but you don't have to use NURBs in order to have curved surfaces. We can use polygonal cages, and then we just subdivide them, and then we have much more control. Yeah, but some shapes you can arrive at a little bit elegantly by using NURBs. So I will be showing that quickly later on. But just to take away from that is that we have something called curve tools. So we have a CV curve. It just stands for control vertex, which is the most common curve tool. So I can click that, and I start drawing the curve. So this is very similar, because you can see that we have a straight version of the curve, which is the control vertices, that they're deciding the curvature. And if I hit enter, now that's a curve. So technically, in Maya, this is a curve. I can right click, and I can see it has different types of components. It has control vertices. And if I start moving around the control vertices, I can manipulate the curve. So it looks very nice because it's very smooth. So you might be tempted to work with curved surfaces. But trust me, you can be a little bit more precise working with polygonal models, because like you're seeing, the premise here is sort of the same. I'm establishing the curvature based on the vertices, which in this case would be the control vertices. It's the same kind of thing. When I hit number 3, that's also a curve. And that's how I can arrive much more easily at very interesting shapes, because now if I extrude this in object mode, I get a very uniform thickness all throughout the object. Actually, so let me get rid of some windows. So when you're in the manipulator handle for the extrude, if you just start pulling here, it'll pull out from the local Z, like the local, like the way the normal is pointing on every poly. So sometimes it's actually easier to arrive at a uniform thickness if you use the thickness operation. So I can just see this is a slight difference, but it tends to keep a little bit more of a uniform thickness all throughout. So I can use just left mouse button as a slider, or I can enter it numerically. So if I did that, and I could, for instance, so if I hit number 3 now, that's what happens. But then I could do something quick, just select that entire face path and just extrude that out using thickness a little bit, and then extrude it again using offset. And now I have creasing edges, and I can press number 3. You have that shape. You can have more like IKEA type strange furniture. So anyways, but I just wanted to show you that, because now when I'm building this curvature, even if I'm not subdividing it, I could choose to build it flat and then care about the thickness later. But in this object, like, I don't really care. It's not that complicated really. But just to show you, so I could do this, and I'm using the side view, and then whatever, let's just rough this in. So it's probably going to curve back a little bit, and then it seems like our measurement might be completely off for this chair though. But we can still play around with the dimensions of everything. But so this is what you have to get used to, just moving the vertices around to establish the curvature. So I wanted to bend it back a little bit, just like selecting all these verts. So it's probably going to curve back, maybe something like that. So if we had a side view of the chair, it would be easier. But just inventing something. And then the front curvature we would care about in a separate operation. So where's the front view? Right here. So when I'm working, I currently have this vertex selected. So if I'm over any of these windows, like if I'm over here, or I don't know where I'm at, I can hit F, and that will frame it in that window. If I hit Shift F, it'll frame it in all the windows. So, and there's probably like a curvature going this way a little bit. So this is how you work. You just make a careful little selection of vertices for you to establish this initial type of curvature. So once you get that right, you can start worrying about thickness. So now when I'm observing this in the perspective view, I have an idea more or less what it's going to look like. So I can also vary the thickness. If I scale the vertices towards each other in the X, slight varying the thickness, you can keep going with this. And then eventually I'm just going to extrude in object mode. So I'm hitting extrude, and this time also in the manipulator handle, there's this little button. So you see the manipulator handle changes. So that's actually to not manipulate it to pull them out according to the normal, but it's according to the world axis. So if I click here once, it will pull it straight out according to the z-axis. So then I can establish the thickness, and then we get that kind of nice uniform thickness at least. So let's compare. Okay, all right. So for something like this, pretty simple object, I wouldn't necessarily, it's obviously not too late to change my mind about the thickness and everything. I can still work with the vertices. Whoops. Yeah, so this will be easier on the lab. The selection here is kind of messing things up. So I can still play around with the curvature a little bit, but this is obviously a very simple object. So when I say subdividing, I just mean for all intents and purposes, for your sake right now, just if you hit 3, it will make a curved version of the model, right? So if I wanted something like this and I wanted to be able to subdivide it, to make it look more smooth. I still need more edges to keep that curvature. But for something like this, I wouldn't necessarily have to subdivide it. I could use Bevel, right? Like we talked about. So that's sort of the difference. You have to make up your mind about which approach you want to take. But when you're subdividing models, what's happening is that you're actually introducing a lot more polys. So let's look at what happens technically. So if I have a cube, whoops, let me just reset the cube primitive. So reset settings. It's going to create a 1 cubic centimeter cube. Scale that up. So there it is. What do you think is going to happen to the cube when I hit number 3? Yep. Yeah. Pretty round. It might not be perfectly round, but it's pretty round. So the default primitive in here is probably a bit more round, the sphere. But it's a different topological solution. It's a different way these polys make out this primitive. Here, it's more like you see, it's more like a volleyball something. You have these, which makes sense because you have these patches. You have 6 patches, and they just bend, and now you have the sphere. So that's the curvature. Anyways, so what's happening? Why is it turning into a sphere? So again, it has to do with the placement of the vertices. So it just looks at all these vertices. So let's think about this curve. It's being defined by this vertex and this vertex point. So 3 vertices define the curvature. Those vertices are placed very far apart. Okay. So since all these are just placed equal distance apart, you know, all these curvatures are pretty rounded off. So if I insert an edge loop here, now this curvature over here, looking at this side of the object, is being defined not by this one, but it's being defined by this one. So 1, 2, 3. These 3 vertices are now defining this curvature. This curvature is being defined by these 3 vertices. 1, 2, 3. So these vertices are placed further apart. These vertices are closer together. So what do you think the curvature is going to look like here? Anyone? Yeah, very steep, more steep. So if I hit 3, you can see that's what happens. 1, 3, just toggling between. So if I hit 2, I can actually see, so this is what we call the polygonal cage. It's just the polygonal model, the simple model that's deciding the curvature. If I hit edge mode and I double click on the polygonal cage, and I can actually start moving this around, you can see it updates. This is what it's doing to the curvature. The placement of the vertices decide the curvature. Turn off discrete rotate. So when you start working with these subdivision models, what you got to be careful with is don't really work too much only looking at it in number 3, like in the subdivided mode, because then you could do stuff like this, and that looks kind of cool and nice. And then you hit number 1, and you're actually just making a mesh that's not legal. You don't want to do this. But I can arrive at that curvature in different ways. I can select this face and scale it down, push that in. Now we're doing more of a legal mesh. That's okay. Right. So anyways, so yeah, so that's just what happens initially to the cube when we subdivide it. How do I get rid of this edge loop? Double click it, control backspace, and it will delete the vertices as well. So if I start placing edges here, and I also place one here this time, now this curvature is being defined by these 3 vertices. 1, 2, 3. Now they're very close together, so we're going to get an even more defined curvature up here. Not here, still very rounded off. But I can keep going, so I do here, I do one there. Whoops. Here, there, there, there. Am I missing something? No, so now you can see that all the sides are defined by 1, 2, 3. Yes? Yes. It would be the exact same solution. So here, you see this corner is being defined by 1, 2, 3 curves. So technically, when you're defining curvature, eventually when you're building models and you're doing this method, you're thinking about the curvature. So whenever you're deciding a curvature, initially you want 3 edges at least to define that curvature, technically. So when I hit number 3, that's the result you get. So these edges are meant for nothing but to retain the sharp, or they're as sharp as, if they're closer together, they're going to be sharper, right? The further they're apart, the less sharp. They're only there to retain that curvature. I don't really need them in this stage, only when I hit number 3. So these are called creasing edges. We call them creasing edges, and you have to get used to building the polygonal cage, building the meshes in such a way that you're deciding the curvature based on your polys. And so, what's your name? What's your name? Jonathan. Yeah. So you said, isn't that like Bevel? Yes, exactly. So this is the other way of doing this very quickly for a cube is just to use the Bevel, and we'll give you the exact same thing. So then I could do Bevel. And if I go down to the operation and I turn the fraction up a little bit using the middle mouse button, take a look at actually, yeah, so we do one segment more. So the bevel with one segment. Why did it turn invisible? That's nice. I don't know, some fancy feature. Now they're all invisible. I don't know. Does anyone know? What is it? X-ray. Oh, okay. Yeah, right. Okay. What's the hotkey for that then? No. Anyways, so yeah, all these things can happen. So yeah, so that's the bevel. So you see, if you look at the poly count, there you have 54 faces, and there you have 54 faces. It's exactly the same solution, but the bevel operation then also will, well, it does a couple of things. So it also will, go away, round off the corners like that, which is fine. It doesn't really matter too much when you hit number 3 on this. It's still going to look pretty good. I'm sorry? I'm not sure what you mean. Hide what? Of this one. Okay, so 3. Yeah, so you see, okay, so that's a good point, actually. So both of these would have a very, very similar result when you subdivide them. If I hit number 3, so what happens when I hit number 3? Sure. You want to look at it. There you go. Yeah, so it's very similar, okay? So what's going to happen when you subdivide? What actually happens is this. We also have the operation under here. It's called smooth. But this is just to smooth it. It's not to go back and forth. So if I smooth it, it quadruples the poly count. So wherever there was 1 poly, now there's 4. So for every increment, it quadruples the poly count, and it introduces a curvature. That's the two things that happen, right? So each time I hit smooth, well, depending on the settings, but this is the division level 1. That's the basis of subdividing. So here you see this is called Catmull Clark. This is named after a guy called Ed Catmull, who wrote a book that's on your reading list. He basically wrote his thesis on subdividing, and he made all this up back in the 70s. So it's been around for a while. But uh, anyway, so this is what happens. It quadruples the polys. It introduces a curvature per operation. So if I apply it again, it will quadruple everyone again. So quick, you get an exponential growth. So obviously, very quickly, this will turn into a lot of polys. And this is literally how you just can define a very nice high poly surface, like for your final render. Anastasia, you have a question? Yeah, excellent question. So the same thing happens. If I hit smooth, it's exactly the same thing literally that happens. It quadruples the polys. Yeah, it's just because of the creasing edges. So when I hit number 3, it's just a way of temporarily hitting smooth and then removing it. Okay? Yeah. All the time. You can just go back and forth. Okay, so that's a good question. So how many times you're smoothing? So that you can control that if you hit Control A. You can actually go into smooth mesh. And this is under smooth mesh, you have something called subdivision levels, and you have preview division levels. So this is how many times you would have been otherwise hitting smooth. In other words, you have the division levels here. Right? So 1 division level is you're quadrupling. 2 division levels, you're quadrupling. So it's an exponential growth. So if you had like 3 division levels, you'll get a very high poly look if you wanted to. So let's try that. Yeah, go away. So this one, why is that my new default? Oh, that's the button there. Okay. So let's compare this. So I'm going to copy it, put it here. So this one, I'm just going to hit number 3. That's what it looks like. And this one, I'm going to hit smooth. I'm going to do division 1. Well, yeah, so that's division 1. So if we were to set this to 1, this is now my subdivision preview, only subdividing to division 1. So it's not looking very nice because it's only quadrupling once. Just the same. This is literally the same thing that happens. It's the only difference is that here we can no longer revert to this. So why would you ever be using smooth? Well, it is a really great feature because, so yeah, we don't have a lot of time, but I'll show you here. So let's say I'm building something here. It's whatever, you know. I'm hitting 3 to see what it looks like temporarily because I can go back and forth, which is really great. And then I go like this, and I subdivide this, and I hold Control to scale, and I scale down, or I push down Control E again, and then I go to Object Mode, hit number 3. Ah, cool. And then I keep going, and I could do like an edge loop here, and 2 edge loops. If I click and double click, I'll select that face path, and then I can extrude, and I'll pull it down, and I'll extrude again, pull it in, and then I go Object Mode, hit number 3. So I'm starting to shape this circular object. So now this would be the initial stage, right? But now I'm thinking, no, I want to add more things here. There's going to be like more parts that I'm not going to just stick in there. It's going to seem like it's welded. It's a welded part of this component, whatever it is. So you can imagine I need more polys to work with. So that's why in this initial stage, let me just copy this. This is the first thing I did. And now I'm sort of committing to this shape. I'm committing to that shape. So I'm saying, well, it's time to add more polys, and then I can just do a smooth. Like I can just keep it in this division. So what do you think what it's gonna look like if I subdivide this and I subdivide this, hitting number 3? It's gonna be, yeah, it's gonna have even more polys, but they're gonna look pretty similar, right? Because the curvature is the same. It's just that now we've committed more to this shape, right? So technically, this is kind of when you start modeling, you're building subdivision models, you're building your polygonal cages. You start out pretty rough. Like you can just start blocking out things and press number 3, see where you're at. But then sooner than later, you probably want to commit to the shape because you need more vertices to work with. So this would never be your final model that you just press number 3 and then you render it. That also has to do with UV mapping and things that we're going to look at, because you want your mesh to retain the curvature. You want the final mesh to, it could be like, this could potentially be a final mesh, and then you would subdivide it in the final render. Well, for you game people, you just, whatever kind of poly count you needed for your game. But this is also something that you could just make a decision on later on. If it were to be a hero object, you'd smooth it more, and so forth. It sort of, yeah, you can decide that later on. But initially in the production, I'm just committing more to the shape, and here I have more polys to work with. So I can do things like extrude. Let me extrude these two, and I'll do an offset. So offset is another way of scaling things together. And then I can push them in, just do whatever. And this typically takes effort to like make these shapes the behavior we want. But there, I have more resolution to work with. This needed to be a part of this mesh for whatever reason. It's a welded part of this thing, whatever this thing is. Right. And then I could even do more. I could do a copy and then smooth it more. Now I have more vertices, or more polys, and I can do things like that. Some detail. And this is also relevant even if you're building a game asset, because things like this could be baked down to your final in-game mesh. So your in-game mesh could be very light in terms of poly count, and then you'd bake this down. Which we won't be doing a lot of in this course, the baking thing. If you're interested, we could cover it for those of you who are interested. It's pretty simple, actually. But no, I shouldn't say that. So you have to get ready. You have to get used to this way of working. So you're starting out building, and you see the benefit of doing this. Look at the polys. So these are all quads, which is what we want. So the pattern in which these polygons are distributed is what we call the topology. So when you hear talk about topology, it just means the way these polys flow around. You can see we have only quads, which is technically a very nice solution. And it's just because we're just modeling from quads. We're not starting to think. I think this is a way of not overcomplicating it, because you can arrive at various shapes by following this technique. You can actually arrive at any shape, anything you're building, but you're forcing it to retain quads when you're building. So you end up pretty much with this very nice topology, very nice topological solution. The way to overcomplicate things, I think also, sometimes a lot of you will watch a lot of tutorials, and they'll do interesting things like, and it's great for like really low poly modeling, when you have to go in here and see how can you really make the most out of the fewest polygons possible, and then they'll start. The problem is that you start introducing tries, right? So when you introduce tries, something that's not a quad, you no longer have this nice just automatic transition. So when I go up and smooth this, well, technically it will become quads, but it's trust me, it makes for a less elegant approach. So when you start overcomplicating things, because you can arrive at shapes. When I needed this guy down here, and it could seem like, oh, that would be like a horrible job. I would have to go in there and really do a lot. No, not really. You just needed more polys. So initially, even if you're like a low poly, you'd like to make a really low poly in-game model. UVFX people don't have to care too much about that, but it's still a nice practice being able to produce really low poly models. But even though you're doing that, even so, you would still don't really get too bogged down with that initially. It's like, yeah, I need more polys. I'm just going to insert polys, and then I'll do what I want. And then I will think about reducing this at a later stage. It is a slightly more efficient. How can I get a circular opening here? Yeah, there is a new circularize tool. I don't know where it is. It is somewhere. You can select these. I don't know. There is a circularize tool. It is a new tool. Have you seen it? No. It's called circular. Well, maybe it's a part of the modeling tool set, wherever that is. Yeah, we have something called, they added this thing. And granted, there are some nice tools here. Yeah, whatever. So, but there is a circularized tool. Maybe it's 20. Yeah, I don't know. This is the latest version, right? Yeah, but I'm just gonna show you how would I like you can always make anything you want just pretty simply. If I wanted that to be circular without the circular tool, granted the circular tool would be nice. I'll make a cylinder and I'll decide on the subdivision axis. So typically we stick to even numbers. So when you're building, I think you'll find 8 is often a nice number. Has to do with that this is all quads. So if we count these, we have 8 vertices. Right there, 8 vertices. So a cylinder with 8 divisions will have 8 vertices. And then we can snap. So simple as that. So where am I? Here. Okay, so these are in the way. Let me just control H, and I can hide these things. Oh, I hid the wrong thing. Shift H. Yeah, so I'm on the other side of it. That's fine. So I can snap to point, so it's in the middle. So typically when you're building models, you want to be working centered in the grid. Okay, you work structurally, you work centered in the grid. And there's a feature here called wireframe unshaded. Also the X-ray feature, which I enabled somehow. But wireframe unshaded, that will show you the wireframes, even if I deselect the models. It's very helpful sometimes to go in here, shading, wireframe unshaded. And I think you have to do it, yeah, you have to do it also for the other ones. So here, each of these panels. But now I can do, like the pivot point for this guy, oh, it seems like I made keyframes. No, I didn't. Why are they red? That's strange. Let me copy the mesh. Sometimes you can copy the mesh to get rid of some issues. Okay, so if I hold V to snap to point, I will snap it in there. And then I can position it the way I want. So yeah, the circular tool would be quicker. There is a circular tool. I'm excited. But why? Now it's really bugging out. It became green. What am I doing today? This makes no sense. Never seen that. Is it a part of my? No. Well, it's probably some new fancy feature. I'm sure. Did I make it live? Yeah, okay. So all these things, there's probably like new hotkeys for everything. I don't know. Seems that way. But anyways, I made the object live. All these things can happen. I couldn't touch it. Okay, so then there's like a million things it could have been, and I made it live. If you make an object live, you can snap things to it. But I don't want to do that now. Then I got these verts, and I can start point snapping. So I hold V. I'm in the move tool. I'm holding V. Middle mouse button, drag and drop. I'm point snapping. No. So typically, since this is a symmetrical object, which it is, and it should be. So always when we're building things, it's nice to have a dividing line across the symmetrical, like across the axis, right? Even for the chair, you saw that I added, if I take a look at there's a dividing line here in the mathematical center. Oh, yeah, a lot of diversions here, I'm sorry. But I have to just show you that. So if I delete that, control backspace, now there's no middle edge. How do I make a middle edge? You do use the insert edge loop tool, but if you go into the settings for it, you can do multiple edge loops, 1, which makes no sense. But if you do multiple edge loops 1, it will just place 1 in the mathematical center. Okay, so now let's delete also this half. And then we can delete these polys. So now I'm just building this. So I'm at, okay, well, I just wanted a circular opening, right? So I don't have to attach it. But we could have attached it. Let me show you that. But anyways, there it is. And I can also realign these verts. You know, if I snap in this axis to this vertex, maybe move it forward. Then I want to realign all these verts. So I hit, this is going to be 0, Z. Now it should work, and I am going to go to my shelf. I'm going to delete history, freeze transformations. I'm going to center the pivot. Do these things. It's great to do. You're making Maya a bit more happy. And then mirror. Mirror. And this time, can anyone tell me the axes? And minus or negative? Yes, minus, because it's not with the axis, it's the other way. And then mirror. Now, press 3, everything should be together and nice. Oh, if you quickly want to just isolate what you're working on, you can hit Shift-I to isolate. That isolates whatever's selected. Then if you click nothing and hit Shift-I, that will isolate nothing, so everything appears. Okay, so now I have a hole there, and I'm looking into the back faces, which is something I said we never want to do. So then I could do, like, I'm going to select this face path, just double-click, do an extrude, do offset, do another extrude, click here to enable world space and coordinates, right? So I'm just going to pull it in, do another extrude, click here again, hold control to scale, and there's still a hole there. How can I fill the hole? Does anyone have a suggestion? Yes? Yeah, so there are a lot of tools. So one option is the bridge, which we could have used. I'm not going to use it. But there's lots of ways of doing things. The manual way of doing it, which I'm also not going to do, would be to like start extruding. Right, you get the idea. You start extruding, and then you would merge the vertices, right? There's another way. You can select the outer edge loop, and then you go to mesh, and there's something called fill hole. That'll fill the hole. Now, do I have a technically correct model here? What's the problem? Yeah, an octagon with 8 edges. So we just say like n-gon, anything more than 4, we never want that. So technically when you're building, this has to do with a lot of different issues, but most importantly, it has to do with the modeling workflow. It's going to be much, much more difficult if you start getting into the habit of leaving like n-gons around and leaving. You can have some tries. Okay, tries are technically okay, but we never want n-gons. This is an n-gon. How can I fix the n-gon? Yeah, so like one. Yeah, how do I do that? Multi-cut. Then we can add it to the shelf. This is the multi-cut. And then you can just hold over that edge, and it will sort of hover around. You can see. So hold there and click, and it will create an edge. And then click enter. Now we have an edge. So it's still not okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 2 n-gons. So I can click 1 and click there and hit enter. Now do I have a legal mesh? Yes, because these are actually quads. If you count the edges, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, that's it. And then if I wanted to, I could still do something here. Extrude, offset. I'm just making stuff up. Okay, great. Have a little thing there. Shading, turn off wireframe on shaded. That's it. So that little detail obviously needed to be a part of the same mesh. I can't just insert another object there. This is a nicely little welded, fabricated piece. So, and for you game people, again, this is something that could easily have been baked down, something we call a normal map, onto the low-res version of this object. So it's really, really relevant. Also, if you want to be doing low poly modeling, you have to be able to do high poly modeling. There's no distinction. Being able to do really, really good low poly models just means that you're good at retopologizing, in my opinion. So you can't just only be making really low poly models, then you're not really making anything. So anyways, so that's, yeah, the basics of sort of subdividing, how you can approach it. You build up what we call polygonal cages. You pay attention to all these things. Didn't get very far with my chair, but you saw that how I was able to copy things over symmetrically. I think if you just apply more time with this, you have what you need to build it. So what I also wanted to just show you that if you spend a lot of time building something, this could be an element in something else. If you're making the table, maybe now this will serve as my table leg, and I'll just scale those verts up a little or something. If you can get away with it. So that's more like a modular kind of approach, and you save you a lot of time. So for your assignment, I obviously want you to make a little kitchen set. So just make a reference search for a chair, a table, whatever you want to do. I really recommend keeping it very simple. So try to find some simple objects. And when you do that, you can then expand. And so like if you know, like a really cool challenge would be sort of do like a Victorian type furniture, which would be obviously more curved surfaces, but then you could really go in here, spend a lot of time like tweaking how can you make these beautiful subdivision surfaces, meaning that you still build a polygonal cage first. Yep. Yes. You need, well, I don't know what I wrote in the thing there. I think so. Also, like, didn't really have time to model anything, but I think I'll show you in the lab probably. We'll do at least do like a, we'll see. Yeah. So let's head over to the lab. You won't really get a much of a break, but for the first group will be games. Then we'll do VFX. Yeah. So VFX, you can show up at like 3 340. So I'll see you over there. So if you head on over there right now, the TAs should be there, some of them at least.